and dear representatives, allow me at the onset of my speech to present my thanks to Volkan Bozkır for organizing this plenary session. First and foremost, I would like to extend my condolences to the Palestinian oppressed, and may God rest their souls. And I also would like to extend my condolences to the Palestinian nation, and I wish speedy recovery to our brothers and sisters who have been wounded and whose numbers reach to thousands. Ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately there is an ongoing crisis in Palestine which wrench our hearts, and this tragedy goes on, and the perpetrators of this tragedy is repeating their crimes again and again, leading to the oppression of the Palestinian nation, and the perpetrators are trying to make us insensitive to this oppression. But it is not possible for us to keep silent against this oppression, because if we are silent against the injustice, it means we are the partners in crime. The ones who are silent against the injustice is a devil without a tongue. In order to understand the current situation right now, we should first of all diagnose and analyze the underlying and root causes. The current crisis is due to the provocations of Israel and the attacks on the holiness of Masjid al-Aqsa, the prevention of the freedom of worship of the Palestinians, and the forced evictions of the Palestinians from their homes in Sheikh Jarrah. Those attacks have been carried out during the holy month of Ramadan, which is the month of worshipping. In Gaza, not only the homes of the civilians have been targeted, but hospitals and schools have been targeted. Umrah, the buildings of the Red Crescent has been bombed as well. The most important doctors of Gaza have been murdered with the airstrikes of Israel. So we should speak and discuss those issues clearly. Those attacks constitute a war crime, and we have to pinpoint the perpetrators of those crimes. Today, what happens in Jerusalem, in Gaza, has one responsible: Israel. If we are not holding Israel responsible to its crimes, unfortunately those tragedies will be inevitable to be repeated. Honorable President, if we want a sustainable peace and stability in the Palestine lands, we can accomplish it only if the illegitimate occupation of Israel ceases to exist. Unfortunately, the latest attacks are an integral part of ethnic cleansing by Israel. The blockade of Israel on the Palestinian lands turned those geography into the biggest open prison. In this land, more than 2 million people live. It is 365,000 square meters of a land. Those maps are representing the reality. From 1947 until now, you see how the lands of Palestine have been occupied and have been usurped and seized from them. We know that the representatives who are present here can see these maps again and again, because under the roof of the United Nations, our Palestinian brothers and sisters are showing those maps. But the whole world should see this map very clearly, because this map shows us how the Palestinian lands have been stolen by Israelis. This is the picture and the summary of the occupation which started in 1947. With those attacks, Israel is trying to deteriorate the possibility of a bi-state solution, and Israel is trying to accomplish a fait accompli. So right now we shouldn't only accomplish ceasefire, but at the same time we should take the necessary steps and we should mobilize the international community in order to put a sustainable end to those attacks. Honorable President and distinguished representatives, we once again see that the United Nations fails to take on its responsibilities. It is so upsetting to see that in the time when the United Nations is needed, unfortunately the United Nations is inactive. Our President, His Excellency, has made a call stating that the world is greater than 5, and this statement has been delivered for that purpose. I mean, if the United Nations could have taken on its responsibilities, then this illegitimate attack by Israel would have been condemned by the United Nations, and the United Nations was going to act in order to prevent this ethnic cleansing taking place in Palestine. So it is high time we took moral and legal precautions in order to stop the attacks of Israel. The barriers and obstacles should be eradicated in order to dispatch the humanitarian aid to the Palestinians in the region. Honorable President, when the United Nations Security Council is unfunctional, the General Assembly of the United Nations have adopted many historical decisions in order to protect the historical status of the Jerusalem, and this topic is at the epicenter of the ongoing conflicts right now. The international community has the responsibility to protect the Palestinian people. In the decision accepted on 13th of June 2018, the United Nations General Assembly called upon the protection of the Palestinian people and urged Israel to stop the prevention of entries to the region and urged the international community to provide humanitarian aid to the Palestinian brothers and sisters. And we should work in order to establish an international protective mechanism to be deployed in the region. This protection mechanism can be established with the financial and military support of the countries, and it should also constitute a physical protection mechanism, and Israel should actually pay for the crimes that it perpetrated. It will be highly important for the protection of the Palestinian people. In that regard, the international organizations and the international courts have huge responsibilities. Honorable President, esteemed Secretary General and distinguished representatives, if we want to get rid of this infertile cycle of violence, again the international community has a huge responsibility. The peace process and also the bi-state solution should be reinvigorated again in order to protect the holy status of Jerusalem, which is important for 3 religions. It will be highly important if we want to establish the permanent peace in the region. The ones who are criticizing the aggression of Israel is trying to be silenced with the excuses of anti-Semitism. We believe that anti-Semitism is a crime against humanity as well. There are many Jewish people who criticizes the aggression of Israel, both in my country, in the United States of America as well. So do you think that those Jewish people are also anti-Semitic? So in order to cover our crimes, or in order to silence the ones who criticizes us, do not opt for anti-Semitism accusations. We will never be silent against this aggression. Distinguished ministers, it is quite essential to put an end to the conflicts between the Palestinians. Only a united Palestine can embrace this cause and find solution to the pains of the Palestinian people. The elections in the Palestine should be organized without further delay. But we should never forget that Israel is the sole responsible for delaying those elections. Honorable President, the legitimate request of the Palestinian people to live under dignity cannot be prevented anymore. The Republic of Turkey will be standing by the Palestinian nation in order to protect their sovereign rights. Thank you very much, Honorable President.
I thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Turkey for his...
All right, Turkey's Foreign Minister Mevlut